afternoon. If I start to speak softly, that's in my nature. Please let me know. Try to turn up the volume. It's not easy to sit here before you today. I oppose the nomination of Dan Edwards, and I have first-hand personal reasons that I'd like to share with you. I may be a little disjointed. I'm going to try to respect the chairman's request that be as brief as possible. So with that in mind, I'd just like to point out that there are irregularities in elections across the state, and we all agree with that. But some of those are preventable, and I'm going to get into that in my presentation today. And some of those I hold the AG's election argument accountable for why certain things have not been corrected, and justifiably so. So everybody knows about the Wyndham incident. The November 3rd, 2020 election, the losing margin was 24 votes on election day. That grew to 420 votes after a hand recount. That's the largest numerical discrepancy in the history of the state. The AG's office, the Secretary of State's office, the governor's office wanted nothing to do with looking into how that happened. As a person who lives in Windham, I wanted to know. I didn't say it was fraud. I never used that word regarding the Wyndham problems. I wanted to know if our machines malfunctioned. I wanted to know if our election officials understood the law and followed proper procedures. I wanted to know if maybe there was a possibility that the hand recount wasn't done properly. Although I was at the hand recount and I thought they did an awesome job, and I was upfront about that from the very beginning. But I didn't make an assumption, I didn't discount and assume that they did the job right. Because maybe they did, even though I was there, I was only walking around and observing one table primarily of 4. Mistakes can be made. But from my perspective, if you have the largest issue in the history of the state regarding numerical discrepancies, and you don't want to know what the problem is, you're the problem. That to me was egregious. That was malfeasance. That's my belief. So I worked with Senator Bob Guida. I worked with Dr. David Strang. We worked together to put together SB 43. And then at the 11th hour, as it passed the Senate unanimously, it went to the House. And as it was going through the House, there was talks about amendments and potentially conflicting amendments. So for the first time in my life, I reached out to Secretary Gardner. And I didn't know if he would even take my call, because I had been very critical of him and his office in writing for the GraniteGrok. And I probably wrote 24 articles about what took place in England, and all of them were different. All of them just built upon the next and kept a history of what was transpiring. And I found him to be cordial, open-minded, and truly interested in trying to uncover what took place in England. And we worked together, and I have become very close with the former secretary. I am truly appreciative of his approach and his concerns for the integrity of our election process. And those feelings have also transferred over to current Secretary Stanton. I believe he is also a man of integrity and truly concerned about the integrity of our elections. So I want to say that I agree with what Tom Murray said about the audit. The SB 43 and what was passed was supposed to be an independent audit, and it was not. The AG's office played a pivotal role in that process. And you heard Ann Edwards when she was up here. She was asked about implicit bias and how she's been trained to deal with that. Well, I believe I was the target of her bias during that entire 3-week process of the audit. We were asked as observers. There were, I believe, 10 from the state, 10 from the town, 10 from the state, and 10 at random, and 10 by the Secretary of State's office. And Secretary Gardner wanted to make sure that I was in there and had an opportunity to observe. And on the very first day, people were asked if they had questions for the auditors before they got into the process, which was going to start the next day. Everybody raised their hand and had questions. The auditor missed mine. I held my hand up for the entire time, every question. And when they shut down, I went over to Ms. Edwards and I said, I have a question for Harry Hursty. And she said, I could not ask the question. And she said, I said, I had my hand raised all the time. She didn't care. It was Bill Gardner, when I spoke with him, he came there concerned that I was being shut out of the process because I was one of the people who helped make that audit happen. And he wanted to make sure that I felt comfortable as a citizen. And I thought that was extraordinary on his part as a government official, where our government, too many people in government dismiss the people that they were elected to represent and serve. So he made sure that I had time with Harry Hursty and I had my questions answered. So I agree with Tom Murray. There's concerns about the deletion of the memory cards, cameras. There were multiple times that Senator Guida and even Secretary Gardner had to intervene to make sure that the intent of the law was followed. And they had those discussions specifically with Dan Edwards. So, with that said, I'm going to jump around. So, in addition to the issues that took place on November 3rd, 2020, following the auditor's report, I just want to make sure you have a chance to listen. Following the auditor's report, the AG's office and the Secretary of State's office put together a joint report and delivered it to women officials on January 7th, 2022. It listed over 130 violations of election law and procedures. So clearly our officials have issues with lack of knowledge of the law, because I don't believe that they intentionally violate the law. I believe that we have great people serving our elections across the state, but not all are educated enough to do that. I filed a complaint with Tom Murray on December 21st of 2022 regarding the September primary in 2022. It listed 33 issues, and each one was referenced to specific official election documentation. Each one was delivered as a PDF. Each one has links. It's a complaint on a silver platter. It took over 100 hours to put it together and to cross-reference and to make sure all the numbers are accurate and presented properly. I still haven't gotten an answer. Now I'm told, well, it's the last time I reached out to the AG's office was, I believe, in February. I was told it's an investigation process. They don't talk about that. But I'll now refer back to a committee of voter confidence meeting, of which I was asked to serve on by the Secretary of State. We went around the state. We listened to people's concerns as to if they had confidence or they had a lack of confidence in our elections. And when we went to Berlin, Ann Edwards and Miles Madsen came and testified before the committee. And they made a statement that they enforce election laws. And that when asked, do you have enough people to do so, they replied yes. Because the committee felt obligated to put that in their recommendations if they felt that they needed more people. Well, it's been 4.5 months of the second federal election in a row where there has been issues that have been raised. And now we've gone through a local election. I reached out to Miles Madsen a month before then, asking, saying that time is of the essence. We have yet another election because I want to make sure that all of our votes are counted properly. So I have issues with the lack of response for holding our election officials accountable. While I served on the committee, a woman named Brenda Town came before us, and also Al Brandano. And they spoke about 15,000 examples of votes cast in the name of people who had moved. Some moved to other parts of the state, and some moved to other parts of the country. But it was a very detailed list. It showed that detail. And I raised that with Ann Edwards in Berlin, and she said that that should be given to them so that they would investigate. Well, I spoke with Brenda a couple days ago, and she said that herself, Al Brandano, and another woman spoke with Ann Edwards, and they were told that moving from your address is not enough to disqualify a person from voting from their old address. And that if a person still considers an address their home, or if they still consider a town their community, they can legally vote there. I don't think that's what our election was, sir. There were too many. She also, and I expect you to hear this directly from Brenda. She said she would give you written testimony. But I want this to go on the video. Did she say that? Yeah. Okay, terrific. She said that there were too many examples to investigate based on just the United States Postal Service permanent move record confirmation. But it's important to know that when you request a permanent address change, you're doing so under oath, and that you can be held accountable for that. And Brenda was also told by Ann Edwards that New Hampshire has no issues or very little problems with voter fraud, so there is no widespread issue to be concerned about. How do you know if you don't investigate? I'm not saying there's fraud there, but I definitely am not saying that there's no fraud, because you don't know until you look into it. It's the same issue with what happened in Montana. So the lack of looking into this, I believe, is an example of incompetence or malfeasance. She was also provided a list of 64,000 names of voters who had moved from their address but remained on the 2022 voter registration. And she stated that there was no law that she could reference so she could help clean up the voter rolls, but RSA 654-36B and page 47 of the Election Procedure Manual explains the obligations of local election officials to keep their voter rolls clean. That's the law. And if the AG's office enforces the law, they have the right to step in and tell the supervisor of the checklist to do their job. You can't just say, I don't have the authority to do so. So I also have concerns about Ms. Edwards being reprimanded by the court for not following the court order. It's hypocritical. If you're going to serve, if now you're seeking to serve on a court, I would expect that if people don't listen to her orders, that she might have something to say about that. Article 8 of our Constitution says all power residing originally in and being derived from the people, all magistrates and officers of government are their substitutes and agents and are all times accountable to them. Therefore, government should be open, accessible, accountable, and responsive. That has never happened with Ann Edwards. I've dealt with her on multiple occasions.
Can you wrap it up shortly, Ken?
I will. I'm almost done, sir. Thank you. Someone else pointed out Article 35. It is essential to the preservation of the rights of every individual, his life, liberty, property, and character, that there be an impartial interpretation of the laws and the administration of justice. It is the right of every citizen to be tried by judges as impartial as the lot of humanity will admit. I was personally targeted by Ms. Edwards, so I don't believe that she has the ability to be impartial at all times. I agree with what Heather Mullins said when she was up here. She spoke about the appearance. and the people need to have a level of confidence in the people who are gonna sit in judgment with them. And the story about the Wyndham audit, whether or not, whether or not you believe that something took place that shouldn't have when Ann Edwards was in the room, you know, there's reality and there's perception. And the perception is that, you know, it's written down, and it's for everybody to see. And this statement is, it's highly unusual for a late night visit to the room where the audit is taking place by none other than New Hampshire's Assistant AG, Ann Edwards. So that paints a picture, and it's a lack of trust. I want to just point out that Attorney General Famella said that, you know, referenced this. He said that when the cameras went down, Ann Edwards was very, you know, she knew how important those cameras were, and she took the time to go and look at them. I just, for the record, I want to point out that before the audit started, she was against having cameras 24/7 and only wanted cameras during the time the audit was taking place. She did not want the 24/7 throughout the entire audit process. Senator Bob Guida came down, made an issue out of it, said that that's what the intent of the law is, and that's why we had cameras 24/7. So I'll wrap up my testimony there. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you, Ken. Any questions from the council?
Thank you.
That's the testimony from Ken
I
Eyring
do want to
in
say,
front of Executive Council.
this woman back here made a good point. Most of the people in opposition to Ann Edwards are your constituents. Everyone else has worked with him. So you have to weigh them, right? Are they covering? The perception also is that maybe people are covering for it too. And maybe there's political favors being given there.
Today is May 3rd, 2023.